Hi guys, welcome to Pixel Affair. It's Kobe here. So I've been working on a project that requires a lot of simulation, smoke simulation and stuff like that, right? And in the process of looking for ideas on how to do smoke simulation and the way I want to do stuff, I found this particular video of flowing liquidy like smoky, I don't know how to call it, but like smoke liquid kind of look, right, on the internet, right? And I decided to try it and see how easy it is to do something like this in Cinema 4D. And it's really simple and it's easy. So let's get into Cinema 4D and see how we will set up something like this. So I'm in Cinema 4D and I'm using Cinema 4D 2023.1.3, right? So let's quickly set up our object, and the object we are going to use is a sphere. So I'll come into my object here and I'll create a sphere. I'll reduce the size to, I think, 30, the radius to 30, and I'll change the type to icosahedron. Let's bring the garage shading line so that we see the segments, right? So let's increase the segments, like say 24, and that's basically it. So now let's animate the sphere. So I'll select the sphere, come to its coordinates, and I'll set a keyframe at frame 0, and I'll move it at frame, like, let's increase our timeline to like 150, right? And at frame 120, I'll move my sphere up 500 centimeters. Let me 500, right? And I'll set a keyframe. So that's it. If I hit play, you can see our sphere is moving upwards. We can make it even linear. So I'll select come here, click on this particular knot here, icon here, and you open my timeline. I'll make sure the sphere is selected, and I'll click on this particular line to make our animation linear. Then let's click on this to hide it. Now if I play, you can see it's a linear animation, the sphere is moving, right? The next thing is that I want it to have a little bit of randomness whilst it's moving, right? So first of all, I'll create come to my deformers, or I can actually use a effector. So I'll use the random effector, and I'll make it a child of the sphere. I'll select the random effector and come to in the attribute, the deformer tab, and I'll set it to point, right, to deform the point of my my sphere. Then I'll come to the effector tab again, change it from random to noise, and I'll probably reduce the animation speed to like say 50, and then the parameters I'll set it to like maybe 15 or like say 15, right? So 15 by 15 by 15, right? And if I hit play, you can see giving some randomness to it. Maybe you can increase it more if you want, right? So we give animation, but it's still going up linear, and I want it to be going on the side and side like this. So to do that, I'll create a null object. I'll make the sphere a child of the null object rather, so that I'll use a vibrate tag. If I right click, come to animation tags, I'll choose vibrate tag, and now I'll enable position. The position I want to enable, I want it to move on the X, right? So something like that, maybe 29, yeah, so that it gives it a little bit of randomness and movement, and that's basically it, right? So after this one is set up, now let's go ahead and right click and add our pyro simulation. So I'll right click. Another thing I have to do is I'll select the sphere at frame 0. I'll make sure the radius is set to maybe at frame 30 here. I'll set the radius is set to 30 centimeters, and at frame 0 I'll set it to like say 10. So I want it to start small and then it grows up like that. Yeah, maybe at frame 40. So basically, yeah, this is all the animation that I'll do to the I did to the sphere basically. Then I'll right click on the sphere, come to my simulation tags, and I'll choose pyro, right? Now if I hit play, take a second. Now you can see we have our sphere generating pyro, and everything is working fine. But now you have to do some small settings in the pyro. So first of all, select the pyro tag, right? And I'll come down into the settings. I'll uncheck how do you call it, temperature, because we want only the smoke. So I'll uncheck temperature, and in the smoke I'll make sure the density is set to 0. Let's set it to 10, right? And then also I'll come down to the velocity. I'll select the velocity, and it's set to movement. So what basically the velocity is using is that when the movement of your object, the velocity sort of follows, right? But I want it to go the negative way. Whilst my object is going down, I want it to push the smoke down. My object is going up. I want the smoke to be pushed downwards. So I'll select, instead of 100, I'll set it to -100. And now if I hit play, you can see it's pushing it downwards a bit, right? But it's still coming up. And that's because of the buoyancy in our object. So I'll select now the Pyro object itself, come to the Pyro tab here, and now let's do some changes here in the settings, right? So the first thing I'll say is that this, you see the buoyancy is set to -5. Let's set it to just 5 itself, and now you will see it now pushing it downwards. That's basically it. Another setting, let's actually work, for instance, the turbulence in here. Let's reduce the turbulence to, like, say 0.5, right? And now I think everything, the turbulence I think is fine. Let's reduce the vorticity to also 0.5, right, of the strength, so that you don't have so many randomness in it. And now that's basically our object. The rest is that we have to make sure the dissipation, right, is very low. So I'll close this and come down. You can see dissipation. Let's set it like, say 2, so that our density or our smoke doesn't disappear early. So I'll set it to, say, just 2, like with the density, because we are working on density, right, so that it doesn't disappear early. And now that's basically it from here. And now we have something coming, right? So for me to get that mesh to it, it's as easy as coming into a volume measure or volume builder. We can put it in the volume builder or the volume measure, any of them, but I'll use a volume measure. Another one, last one thing is the Pyro, the voxel size are too big, but in this case we are fine. So I'll make it like, change the voxel size from 5 to 3, and I'll select the Pyro object itself, and I'll also change the voxel size in there to 5 to 3, from 5 to 3, and now it should be fine, right? If you want, you can actually make it like, say 1 or even lesser to get a lot more details, but in my case, I mean, I was just trying it out, so I didn't want to stress my machine a lot, so I just did it like 3 and it worked. But you can make it more smoother and by reducing the pixel, the voxels and everything. So after everything is created, now you can simply make the Pyro object here, right? Let's drag the Pyro object here. You can make it a child of your volume measure. So if I make it a child volume measure, right, nothing really happens. Let me hide the Pyro. So if you can see, nothing really happens, and you can even hide the sphere. And that's because you have to hit Control D, come to the simulation tab, right, which is the project setting. You can also find it here. If you click on the mode here, you can choose project, and it will bring you here to the project settings, right? In there, you can go to the scene tab, and you make sure simulation before generators is on. So if I choose simulation before generators, and now if I go back and hit play, you should be seeing something. Still not working. So I think we should select the volume measure. Actually, yeah, one thing I forgot to talk about is we have to make sure we select our Pyro, because our Pyro, even though it's showing in our viewport, right, it's not really in our viewport, it's just a picture of it. So for us to actually have access to it in our viewport, you have to select the Pyro object itself, come to the object tab in here, and make sure the object properties, you see, the density is set to on, so that it means it be visible in our viewport. Right now it will work perfectly. So if I now enable my volume measure and hit play, you can see something is happening. Let me hide the Pyro object. You can see now we are getting some volume showing up in here. So that's basically it. Now let's select the volume measure and reduce the voxel range. Let's bring it down to something smaller, right? I think something like this, fine. And now you can see we have our volume measure working. Let me change the display to just shading, and now you can see we have our volume measure working. All right, so that's basically all I did. From here going, you can add your smoothing, deformer, and everything to it. So for me to get things to work, what I really did is I'll select the voxel. You can actually make it work here, but what I do is I actually select the voxel in here, Pyro object, I mean in here, and I actually went to the Pyro, make sure the cache tab, and I make sure I cache my Pyro before I actually now put it back into the volume measure, right? So I do that. Let's quickly do that and see what happens. Now, one last thing before you cache is, when you are caching your Pyro simulation, it can actually get very huge and in sizes and everything. So what I recommend is that make sure in the object tab here, you make sure everything that you don't need you just like uncheck, so that it doesn't cache unnecessary stuff to make your files bigger. So for instance, I don't need the velocity in this particular case, so I'll set it to off, and I don't need the temperature. All I need is just the density. So I make sure only density is what is being exported, so that I don't get large file sizes and stuff like that. Yeah. So now we've cached our simulation, and if I can see, I can now scroll through the timeline and everything plays smoothly, right? So we have our simulation cached and everything. So all I have to do is, let me hide the sphere once again. All I have to do is to make the pyro a child of the pyro object, a child of the volume measure, and let's enable our volume measure. And now if I scroll through, you can see we have our objects and everything working, right? So if I hit play, you can see it's quite smooth and it flows smoothly, basically, right? So now that we have this, the rest is how to add our materials and colors and everything to it. But before I do that, I wanted to get random colors at some places of our volume measure. You can use any object that you want, but in my case, because in Cinema 4D 2023.5 2023 I think and upwards, you can simply right click on any parametric object. It doesn't even matter, generator or whatever. Right click on it, you come to other tags. You can apply a vertex map tag to your object. So I apply the vertex map tag to the object here, right? And the vertex map in here, the field, I actually drag and drag the volume object itself back in here, right? The volume measure, I mean, itself back in here into the vertex map, all right? But what I did is in the vertex, I select the vertex map, and I'll come down here to the mode here. Instead of points, I'll choose curvature, and now you can see it gives us the curvature. And I think concave here, so I'll use concave, and you can even spread it a little bit if you want, however you want it. So I played around with the radius here. I don't remember the exact, but I think probably 30 something. This is fine, right? So now you can see we have the corners are yellow and the outer part are red, and all of that. Maybe let's make it like, say, 15. I don't even remember the numbers I use exactly, right? So this everything is fine, but it's too sharp at the edge, and I want it to be a bit smoother, and all of it blends like smoothly. So to do that, what I did is that I'll select this vertex map, come to the basic tab, and make sure I name it vertex map 1, so that it has a different name. Then I'll right click on this again, come to this, the object other tag here. Now choose another vertex map. I'll name this one vertex map 2, so that we see the difference. All right, and in there, make sure use field is checked, and come to the fields tab. Now in the object, the vertex map 2, we want to use the vertex map 1 to control it. So let's drag and drop in the vertex map 1, right? And it doesn't look like it's showing. Let's bring it out. So I think because it's a generator object, I think the arrangement of your vertex map probably matters. So this is the first vertex map 1, and the second one comes after, right? So now you can see it's showing in here. Let's hit play. Yeah, everything is fine. And then the vertex map 2, right? In here, I'll change it. It's set to nearest. I'll set it to average, and then it will take a bit of a second, but it will smoothen your how do you call it, your vertex map basically. Let's see. It's kind of calculating, I think. So let's wait. So you can see it's set to, the average is set to 100, and it's giving this kind of smoothness. So let's reduce it to, like, say something like 30, and now you can see it smoothens our vertex map, right? So you can even make it smaller, like probably let's do 20. Oh, not 3000. So we set it to 20 rather, and I think 20 is fine. So you can play around with the average, the radius, to get it a bit smoother. So if I select the first vertex map, you see it's very sharp and rough. If that's something you are going for, you can use it. But if you put it in the second vertex map and it changes from their mode from normal to average with the radius, you can actually get it to smoothen it a bit. So this is what you are going to use to drive our colors. So basically from here, what I also did is I usually want, when I'm working with simulation stuff, I usually want to bake my mesh and make sure everything is very predictable. So what I did is I right click and I come to bake as Alembic, and I bake the volume measure, all right, so that I know everything is predictable. And I'll have this one too in the back scene. When I need it, I can later use it. So if you like, you can render this straight for it, but I'm going to go ahead and bake it as Alembic. So you can see my volume measure has been cached into Alembic. So if I disable my volume measure and even the pyro, so what we have here is an Alembic file which, and I can scrub through, and it's quite predictable as well. So from here going, you can add your cameras and stuff to it. You can even go ahead and add smoothing, deformer, and all of that to it. And basically, and within the Alembic too, you have the mesh and everything big in there, right? So we are going to use Redshift to render. You can use normal Cinema 4D render. If you are interested in that, you can let me know, and later I can do something quick on that. But we are going to use Redshift. So let's see how we use Redshift to render our object. So I have this scene already with Redshift DOM light. It's just a normal light, a DOM light with HDRI image, right? You can find HDRI image on the internet that works for you, right? So now it's just the DOM light. That's what you're going to use to render. So let's go ahead and create our material. So I'll come into my material manager and I'll create a new Redshift material, right? And I'll apply it to our Alembic file, right? So let's bring our Redshift render view, and now you can see we have it in here. So let's double click on the material to bring the shader graph in here, and in there the shader graph, look for vertex attribute. So you can see we type vertex and you see vertex attribute. You drag and drop in the vertex attribute, and in there, when you come into our object manager, the vertex map that you want to use on the Alembic file, let's drag the second one, which is this one. Drag and drop it in the vertex attribute, the name here, drag and drop in our vertex map 2. And now let's connect our vertex map 2, if we connect it straight, to our diffuse color of our material. You can see we are seeing the black and white shade. So that's basically it. So from here going, what I'll do is that to attribute a proper color, so I'll actually use a ramp. So I'll come in here and I'll type ramp. And you can see we have this ramp node. Let's drag and drop it in. And now rather, let's connect the vertex attributes to the ramp, right? And now let's connect the ramp to the diffuse, right? And nothing changes. That's fine. So from here going, you can actually define the color I want to use. So let's say in here, I want to use the color, let's say bluish color here, right? You can see it starts showing, and then yeah, I want to use like maybe orangish color or something like that, right? And because you can use the vertex map, the ramp, to control how it looks and everything. You can even add another color, let's say reddish, like something like this. So you play with your colors, see what you can get out of this whole thing. And then let's enable our HDRI so that you can see. And we if you want, we can let it be in the background, but in this case I don't want it to show in our scene, so I can select the DOM light, come down here, and now uncheck background, and now you can have a background which we can later use our own background in our compositing software that we are going to use now. So from here going, you play around, and one thing I did is I added a bit of subsurface scattering in here. I increased it to like 1, so that it gives it that translucent and the light can pass through our object and gives it that feel. That's basically it and everything I did in this particular video. So from here going, it was just playing around with the look and feel, with the color positioning and the light positioning and camera angles and all of that. That's basically all about it. And I want to say thank you for watching. If there's any question, you can actually send me a message on DM, or maybe under the comment section as well, DM on Instagram, right? And kindly subscribe to the channel if you've not, and share it to your friends and family or loved ones where you think it can be very useful to. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.